Streaming is on.
Live streaming is on.
Ah,
There we go. Now we are streaming live. Let me find us on YouTube. And I usually open oh, we are going so fast today. Okay. Okay, there we are. I say hi just in case somebody woke up early today to be here with us. Okay, Jeremy, thank you a lot for accepting the invite. You're probably the most influential writer for us in Argentina. I think I can say that. Wow. Like,
that's
wow.
amazing. That's amazing. Thank you very much for inviting me, Carolina. And it's a pleasure to be in Argentina. Well, except I'm not. That's the problem. And I wish I was.
You are, kind
But
of.
I kind of am. I've had the great good fortune over the last decade or so, maybe longer, of coming to Argentina on numerous occasions, and I love it, and will always agree to come back again. You know, whether it's up in the north in beautiful Salta or down in Comodoro or the beautiful city of Buenos Aires, Cordoba, Rosario. What a beautiful country you come from, and I wish I was. But we're here, so.
Thank you a lot for this. A lot, a very lot. Okay, I'm glad I told you before in the previous chat. I'm glad you are there in your instrument room, and there's a little surprise at the end of this. I hope so. And it's great to know you as as a person, because some of our students just know you as a photocopy, not even a book. And it's good to know who you are, like voice, intonation, your taste for music. That's great too. So I'm glad you said yes to this. Tell us a little bit about lockdown. How are you doing with this?
Well, I think we're all going through the same experience. I'm relatively lucky because this doesn't threaten me in terms of survival. I mean, COVID-19 threatens me, of course, and I don't want to catch it, and I hope I don't. And I haven't caught it yet, but I can live reasonably comfortably, just very alonely throughout coronavirus. I thank God that this has happened in 2020 and not 2005 or even 2010, because of course we live in a connected world. And for me, lockdown has been an incredible opportunity to get ridiculously close to people, to groups of people, to friends, to fellow musicians, to fellow teachers. That's been amazing. It's been, of course, as it is for you, frustrating not to be able to see family members, and especially if they've been going through rough times and things like that. And that's been very difficult and tragic. And of course, my country now is sort of, everything's going a bit wrong because our government is being very unclear, has been very unclear, the politicians, about how to handle this. And now lockdown is kind of easing, and the result is this wonderful kind of national consensus that we had here, and from what I read, you have there in Argentina as well. That's kind of breaking down, and I'm not sure what's going to happen. So it's been a weird thing. It's had, the downsides are so obvious, and the risk of infection and people getting sick, that's terrifying. And my country has the unenviable statistic of being, one of the top countries for death in the world, partly, I believe, because of the way the government in this country has handled it. But, so that's really bad. And some people have had a really, really bad time. But I've had a wonderful time connecting with people, and a sad time and a scary time apart from that.
That's great. Okay, let's start with, I have like so many questions. It's impossible to ask you everything, but we can try.
Okay.
In this book, which I really like,
thank you.
The first chapter, you start talking about global English as a global language. And you also talk about varieties of English. And I know you have an opinion. You have something to say about varieties of English, especially British English in Argentina. Let's talk about that.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Certainly when I first started coming to Argentina quite a long time ago, I mean, the model for Argentinian English was essentially a British focused model, it seemed to me. When I taught in Mexico, which I did for many years, you know, there were British institutes and North American institutes and everything in between. And, you know, people used to discuss which was the best variety of English. And this was at a time when no one ever considered that being a native speaker wasn't just the best thing ever, you know, if you wanted to be a teacher of English. But we've learned so much since then. And what we've learned about English, and English and Spanish, I think, have a lot in common in this respect, is that they're not geographical languages. You know, Spanish, there are so many different varieties of Spanish around the world. You know, and if you listen to Dominican Spanish, and if you listen to, you know, Andalus Spanish from Spain, and then you go and talk to a porteña and stuff like, you know, you get different Spanishes, and then you go to Bogota, and then suddenly you're in Cuba, and so what happens to the language is this wonderful construct that allows us to talk to each other. But the moment you try and prioritize and privilege a variety rather than another, I think you're in real trouble. And that certainly in terms of our professional lives applies to the people who speak the language and who teach it. I'll try not to go on a bit too long, but so Argentina fascinates me. I've met people with such extraordinarily good English in Argentina. And it sounds a little bit like my English, but it sounds a bit different too. Of course it does. And I go to Brazil quite a lot. Well, in Brazil, guess what? I met people who speak really good English, and it sounds a little bit Brazilian, you know, a little bit like I sound a little bit English. And it doesn't matter. But then if you go to Tennessee, you're going to hear something which sounds very different from me or you, or my Brazilian friends, or my German friends, or anything else like that. So what I'm sure about varieties of English is students, especially when they're beginners, need something which they can latch onto and identify and be comfortable with. But the idea of there being a correct English, especially spoken English, is something we have to fight against. And what you do as students get gradually more fluent and able to cope with English is you expose them to Englishes. The exception to that, of course, is writing. And in the case of writing, then if someone was to analyze your writing and my writing, I mean, you know, because I've told you, you speak exceptionally good English. So do I, by the way.
Thank you.
We both speak the same, you know, the same kind of level of exceptionally good English. But if we were to analyze our writing, it would look remarkably similar, apart from personal style. And that's probably the case for some of my fluent speakers of English in Brazil. Our writing would look very similar, though our speech sounds different. And for my Mexican colleagues and friends, you know, it's almost, you can almost instantly, except for people who were brought up in the States or educated in the States, you can almost instantly recognize when a Mexican is speaking English, because she or he sounds like a Mexican speaking English.
Of course.
Even though they're speaking perfect English. And the only thing I'd say about that is when I first started living in Mexico, my dream was for people to think I was Mexican, because my Spanish was so amazing. And it turned out this was a bit of a bigger ask than I expected. I didn't go until I was in my 20s. I didn't. I gradually understood something, which is that I want to be able to speak fluent Spanish and make myself understood and understand Spanish. But actually what I'd really like to do is I'd like to sound like Jeremy in Spanish, you know, without being so ridiculously accented that people go, ha ha. Sorry, go on, ask me another question.
I like that. This has to do with identity. I also believe that we have an identity. This is who we are, and forgetting that is like not cool.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Perfect. But because you told me, remember the anecdote of often and often, and you were like, what?
Oh, I must. Yes, I will tell that story because this. I hope this will amuse you in Argentina. But the very first talk I ever gave was in Buenos Aires. I have no idea how many years ago, and I'd never flown down to the Cono Sur before. It was just wow, I'm on I'm right down at the bottom of the southern hemisphere. Wow, and I was so excited, and everything I'd ever heard about Argentina. Wow, I'm going to Argentina. So I got there, and there was a big lecture theatre, and 200 or 300 people, and it was much earlier in my career, so I was kind of nervous. I get nervous whenever I do those talks, but I was kind of nervous, and the publishers' representatives were sitting at the back, and I was more nervous of them than the teachers, because I thought if my talk goes really badly, they're going to say, why on earth did we pay for his air ticket? Oh no, help. But anyway, so I launched into my talk, and I gave a talk about listening, ways of teaching listening. And I have to say, it's probably the best talk that anyone's given about anything ever on listening. That's a joke, in case you think I'm being serious. That's a joke. Anyway, so I gave this talk about listening, in which I explained these fantastic theories and practices. And at the end of it, everyone clapped, and was like, happy. And I was surrounded by teachers who wanted to talk to me, and this was very exciting. Remember, I was a young, new kind of trainer and presenter, and they all asked the same question. And the question was, we noticed you said often 15 times, but often 17 times, which is correct? And it took me about sort of 4 hours to recover. I thought, I don't believe that. I've just given this incredible talk about listening, and all that anyone wanted to talk about was how to pronounce often and often. But that's because there's a tradition in Argentina, an incredible tradition of kind of phonemic attention to words, and so many Argentinians are so extraordinarily knowledgeable about phonemics and phonetics in a way that certainly a lot of native speakers aren't. By native speakers, I don't mean people who speak better than any of them. On the contrary, I mean people who because they grew up speaking English, don't until they become teachers give it anything like the same attention. And I think that's what that was all about. But it absolutely fascinated me. Now, I've got an answer to that question now, because at the time I sort of thought, did I pronounce it differently?
I don't know.
Which is, but there's a very wonderful dictionary of pronunciation by John Wells, which was published many years ago by Pearson. And of course, he went around looking at how people in Britain, in particular, used words, and he discovered exactly what my audience discovered, which is, often is used about 46% of the time, and often is used about 64% of the time, and they're both perfectly okay, and that's really what varieties are all about, because the whole point of me using that word is that when I said often, everyone understood exactly what I was saying, and when I said often, everyone understood exactly what I was saying. And in the end, it's intelligibility, making yourself comprehensible, not offering barriers to your listener. I think that's what it's all about.
Great. In one of your talks, you said, not telling them how important it is to learn English. Like when teachers start telling students how important it is to learn English, it's not necessarily motivating, because it's like, what? Okay, so how should we motivate? In Argentina, we have large classes, monolingual, mixed abilities, with students who are not naturally exposed to English. So how can you help us motivate them?
Okay, so the point I made in that talk, and I've often made, is if you stand up in front of a bunch of 14-year-old kids from Cordoba or Buenos Aires or somewhere like that, or Salta or someone, you say, look, now this is really important. You really need to learn English, because if you want to get on in the world, you need to learn English, and it will open up the chance for the social mobility and all that. And these 14-year-olds will probably stare back at you and go, yeah, and especially since it's true that a bilingual knowledge of to be bilingual Spanish English is really good if opportunities open up for you. But to be bilingual English and Spanish, you need to be at least sort of B2 or something like that. That's when it becomes useful. And to say this to a bunch of kids at sort of A2 level, well, no, so that's not the route. The route is to somehow do two things, maybe three things, to make what happens in class motivating for itself. That's the first thing. The second thing is to make the content interesting enough to engage students with what's going on. And if the clothes that the content are wearing are English, then that will make those clothes interesting to the students. And finally, and I talked about this, funny enough, last weekend in a conversation I had in Argentina, well, in Cambridge, in Argentina.
And Argentina at the same time.
Is that one of the things I've learned in lockdown is how vital it is for empathy and care to be present in exchanges. The greatest thing that a student can ever perceive from their teacher is that the teacher really cares for them. And whatever level of genuineness that is transmitted by, I'm losing my syntax here. If students really believe you care and that what you're doing is out of care for them, then with the other two elements I suggested, you've got a chance for motivation. And then let's add in some other things. We can add in the thing like, it's much more motivating for students if you give them a choice sometimes about, would you prefer to do it this way or that way? Shall we do this or shall we do that? It's much more motivating if, for example, you can tell, this is back to the issue to do with content, you can tell students a story that that provokes them, that gets them involved, and so on and so forth. In other words, I believe it's really useful for Argentinian kids to learn English, provided they stick with it and they progress and they get to a certain level. My own passionate belief is that being able to speak another language and appreciate films, songs, poems, sounds in another language is just the most beautiful thing in the world. And I know I don't have to persuade you of that, because you know exactly what I'm talking about. We understand each other. And almost certainly everyone watching this knows what I'm talking about. So that's the deal. It's all about, I think it's all about content in the end.
Speaking of content, we have this like small stuff we worry a lot about, like teaching pronunciation, teaching grammar, teaching vocabulary. What is the role of all that in teaching languages? How much should we focus on grammar, especially?
Phew. You see, I've been working in the field of English language teaching for, oh dear,
many years.
Yeah, I guess it must be. It was over 45 years, and I've been worrying about that forever. Teaching grammar is okay. Here are some things, which is why this is so difficult. Number one, You can get away with quite a lot, even if your English is a mess. But if you want to be able to communicate well, and if you want to be able to make your messages clear, your grammar has to be good. There's just no way around that. On the other hand, if you want to be able to transmit kind of who you are and what you are, then that's not the issue. The issue is about other things. It is about things like how you sound and how you stand and how you move and all those kind of things. The most important thing I want from you, my dear student, is for you to give it a go and have a try. And I'm not going to spend my whole life beating your head on the table because you made the mistake with the third person singular S or something ridiculous like that. Because you know what? It doesn't matter. Well, except it does. And that's the conundrum. That's why it's such a problem. I don't want to stifle you by saying it's all about grammatical accuracy. That's what matters. Because that's not what language is all about. Language is about how to express yourself in a different way. So the job then is to somehow make, I think, and this may sound too idealistic, but I think the job is not to teach students grammar. Let's focus for a minute on pronunciation. The job is not to teach students pronunciation. The job is to help students to be able to hear pronunciation, to be able to identify when someone is speaking well and correctly, and if you like, to train their listening brains. So that you can almost see the listening brain kind of flourish and grow and the synapses connecting. And it's the same with grammar. So of course there are really nice grammar exercises and games and tricks and all the sort of thing that we're all terribly familiar with, and they are really great. What I'm less satisfied with now, after all these years thinking about it, are endless lessons which focus on a piece of grammar and massive repetition and drills and all that kind of thing. So it's all about how you engage students cognitively and emotionally. And I think the role of grammar, an approach to grammar teaching makes it the student's responsibility rather than the teacher's task. Does that make any sense to you?
Definitely, yes, and I totally agree. Yes, it's all about, well, I like this idea of emotions. You said earlier that, well, learning a language, it's about communicating, definitely. And
Yeah.
I would like to ask you, what do you think about pair work? I noticed that, well, when I observe students or when students observe classes, they don't describe lots of lessons in which there is a lot of pair work. And I strongly believe that we need to include some kind of pair work or oral interaction apart from all the grammar activities. How can we do that in, again, large classes, monolingual, and mixed abilities?
One of the most amazing lessons I saw was in Beijing in China. And there were about 65 kids in the class, all crammed together, but actually managing to sit in little groups of 4 round tables. This was before coronavirus.
Of course.
They were all quite close together. Now, this was a very, very regimented class. And I don't want to make cultural stereotypes or anything else like that. And it was based on a course book. That's a whole other discussion, maybe for some other time. It was based on a course book, and in this course book, it had a little task, which was, now you're planning you've seen this task hundreds of times, probably used it as I have in classes. You're planning a surprise party for your friend. You have to decide on where and what you're going to do and that kind of thing. And there they were around the little tables, and they had to plan this class. And then at the end of it, they were told someone would be the winner for the best idea. And it was fantastic, you know, because even in this regimented atmosphere, in a sort of in a kind of physical setting which wasn't really conducive to kind of, you know, communicative-y, they got down to it, and together they worked on things. And it was the togetherness. I don't mean that they were together, I love you, because that wasn't necessarily present in the classroom either. But the togetherness was the way in which they took it on board, for whatever reason, that this was a task they had to do, and they had to do it together. So that one of my favorite tasks, I'll come to Pairwork in a minute, is to say to students, let's say we're talking about class B1, B2, to say to students, in 20 minutes, your group has to present whatever this is to the rest of the class. You have to stand up and present. There are only 2 or 3 rules, but one of the crucial ones is that every single person must take part, must participate. Now, how you do it, I don't really mind. And I don't mind if one person does most of the speaking, but the others have to be visibly engaged in presenting as well. Their contribution has to be obvious. And you've got X minutes to prepare this. And of course, the presentation has to be in English, and any visuals you provide, maybe a PowerPoint, maybe a drawing on the board, or maybe a big piece of carton or whatever you like, and stuff like that. It has to be, I don't mean carton, you know what I mean. It has to be, everyone has to participate. And because you've got an endpoint and a task and a goal, and they have to do it together, just like those Chinese kids, then you've got a chance for some learning to take place, some growth to take place. I've been working recently on a video project of where teachers are teaching students in West Africa, in Gabon and Cote d'Ivoire and Cameroon, and I've only seen the videos, and they're teaching 75 kids to a class, rooms with just a big chalkboard stretching the whole wall, kids crammed into benches, and so on and so forth. And it's really interesting watching how they deal with it. But of course, when they put students in groups of 2 or 3 and things like that, the students do work, and they work together. So that even when they're working on a kind of fill-in exercise to revise what they've just been learning, they're doing it together. On the other hand, the problem about pair work sometimes is that if it's a rather woolly task, just practice this, just practice that, I'm not sure how useful that is. What's useful is when you say, you're going to work together to do this, and at the end of it, this is going to happen, and that's what you're working towards. I think that's when it's effective.
What I find more difficult will be, because at least my students at school are beginners, like they can't even produce anything. It's more like, do you think in this context, should we drill or not? To drill or not to drill? How can we help them get started when they can't communicate in English yet?
I think the reason there was such a strong reaction against drilling at one point in my professional career, and it was when the communicative movement people first started getting terribly idealistic, and it kind of swept the planet, except it didn't really, but that's a whole other story. We could talk about that. And there was tremendous sort of reaction against relentless drilling and things like that, because relentless drilling is relentless, and it's like any great experience, you know. It's great, but it loses its power, and it loses its charm, and it wears off. So, but am I against drilling for the students you're talking about? Of course I'm not. It's the most brilliant technique. There's a reason why people have been doing it for 2,000-3,000 years. Why? Because it's quite enjoyable. for everybody, provided you don't screw it up by doing it for 20 minutes or something, and then it's not enjoyable anymore. Number one. Number two, it gives students some kind of group confidence. It doesn't expose students particularly. It allows you, the teacher, to be quite dictatorial about how you want it to sound, but it's not like you're being an absolute witch or anything. It's like, you know, there's a reason for it. And there are all sorts of ways of making it engaging and enjoyable. You can bring the volume up and bring it down. You can do it faster. You can do it slower. You can have, say, U4. You can split the class up. You can do all sorts of things. You can have students standing back to back, and they have to. There are all sorts of ways of making it agreeable and engaging, and making the experience, because in the end, so drilling works. It absolutely works, especially at beginner levels. Just getting students, just, you know, like the, what's the rhythm of this? Da-dum, da-dum, you know, what's the rhythm? It works like that. But you asked me a question about 10 minutes ago about motivation. You know, the whole point about it is, if you can make it the sort of activity that the students take pleasure in doing, it's an even better activity. And if you end up by making it an activity that students only do with a little bit of their brain involved, then it's no longer any use, because we need their head and their heart, you know, plugged in to what we're doing. Otherwise, there's no point.
Yeah, this is fantastic. I also agree that drilling is probably the only way out for beginners, because the example you gave in China, they will use mother tongue for the discussion. They are not ready to discuss in English. So that'll be for advanced students, or yes, those who are ready to talk, threshold level onwards, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned course books, and you said we can talk about in the future. Let's talk about that now a little bit. What is the role of course books in teaching? I know extremes are not good. I know that, but we can kind of balance some things.
Security. By the way, I've got mixed feelings about this. I've got mixed feelings about everything. I'm worried that when you get to my age, you start saying, "Oh, well, it could be this or it could be that, and maybe it's that." So you know, I've written course books. I write course books. I've used course books. I've also argued against course books, and so on and so forth. So let's be quite clear. Good course books are good. Simple as that. They're written by people who care, who are passionate, who've really done their homework, who bend over backwards to provide some of the things I've been talking about ever since this conversation started. In other words, to provide meaningful tasks and interesting tasks and you know, head and heart engaging tasks and so on, and content which is interesting. Fantastic. They should be reliable in terms of their grammar. They often have a sensible and rational approach to sort of sequencing and syllabus design and so on and so forth. And all of that's great. What they don't have, and what they can never have, and what they should never have, is any kind of ability to respond to the people in the room. Any kind of ability to understand when a moment, an enormously, incredibly powerful learning moment arrives in this room. A course book used to be something just written on a flat piece of paper. Here it is. Here's a course book. Here's a course book. It's one that here's a course book, and it's jolly good. You know, the very good thing about global warming or something like that. But it's just words on a piece of paper. Now, when you read a novel, when you read you know, a great Borges novel or something like that, it only works when the reader becomes engaged with the text, and Borges and you, between you, construct the narrative, because it's what you It's what you bring to that reading that makes it a profoundly successful experience. Am I comparing course books to podcasts? No, I most certainly am not. But the same thing works. So the job of a teacher is to try and get students to co-construct what's in the book. That's the first thing. But as I said, the course book can't then say, oh, look what's happening in this class. Oh, I tell you what, I could seize this moment. I could seize this moment and you know, I'm going to spend 15 minutes on that moment because suddenly, wow, we've got this incredible, so it's dropped out of the sky, this fantastic moment when, whether this is beginners or advanced, it doesn't matter. Wow, I could just forget what's on the bloody page for a minute and we'll go with this because they're all with me, they're listening, they're learning, and this opportunity, you know what, you know, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It's just, they will learn more in the next 10 minutes because I'm aprovechando or something like that, something that just happened, than if I was to go on with page 26. And
definitely,
of course, the good
one of your strongest concepts is opportunistic teaching, and I love that, and I repeat it over and over in my classes.
Precisely, and I'm pretty certain you've had a chat. You've had a chat to Scott, I think, in this series.
Yes.
Well. He's a dear friend, and I admire and love him. We argue quite a lot about some things, and he's further in one direction than I am. But when he talked about dogma and about this whole unplugged teaching, I think he and I talk about the same kind of thing. It's those moments which are not regulated by syllabuses, they're not regulated by the course book. A moment that literally, it's like someone opens the window and the light streams in, and the good teacher responds and works with it and uses all their skill and their humanity to take advantage of it. So, and then we could, lots of problems with course books. Some of the content in course books is rubbish, we know that. And the real problem, and again, Scott and his colleagues latched onto this, is that a rigid syllabus is not particularly useful because just because Unit 11 is the present perfect, it's not necessarily a good time to introduce the present perfect. It just happens to be there. What can a teacher do about that? Well, often not that much, especially in an exam-driven culture, which is a big issue. But what the teacher can do is at every moment when they're using this course book to look for the window opening, to find those moments, because this is such an old cliche, but in the end, it's what's happening in the students' heads that matters, not what's on the page, and it's not what's in the teacher's head. It's what's happening in the student's head. So course books are a very mixed blessing, but I can't imagine having started as a teacher without using course books, and they're reassuring and helpful and useful, and sometimes they're really good and sometimes they're not. So a good and confident teacher, and that's not necessarily an easy thing to become, a good and a confident teacher knows when to, if you like, not exactly abandon, but to shift focus away from a course book.
Great. You've been talking about the role of the teacher, good teachers, blah, blah, blah. And when you, in a recent talk about coronavirus and virtual education now, you said that teachers are flexible and adaptable, or they are not teachers. And this is very interesting right now when we had to move everything online and suddenly, okay, we adapt or we die or something like that. So how do you see teaching English online?
Because what you've just said is truer than maybe you meant it. But yes, I think some teachers have had a really rough time. I don't mean with their families, when older members of their family have got sick and they can't visit them and that kind of thing. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't mean that. I mean, all of my professional life. I've been teaching online for about 12 or 13 years at the master's level. Okay, but you know, almost all of my professional life has been in classrooms or in lecture halls or in seminar rooms, face to face. That's what, and you're the same. That's where we are. That's where we live. That's where we're situated. And then suddenly, everyone had to become online teachers overnight. And of course, for some people, this was not too much of a stretch because they'd been doing it already. But for other people, they had to do that. I've been so, and I'm not currently teaching on a sort of 7-day a week, 5-day a week basis. So I've been spared that shock to the system. But I have talked to and observed and watched what teachers are doing, and I've been blown away by some of the creativity, some of the thoughtfulness, some of the incredible response of teachers to this. And I always use this word good teachers, and I don't mean good, because then you start saying, oh, she's a good teacher, she isn't a good teacher, and that's rubbish. I don't mean good teachers. I mean teachers I would like to be taught by, or something like that, are the ones who've understood immediately that the very best they could do face to face, somehow there had to be a way of doing that, or even doing it, or even better, in this weird new virtual world. I don't mean the virtual world is new, but having to be 100% virtual rather than face to face. And my word, some people have been brilliant. Of course, we've all had to do it to a certain extent in whatever area of our lives we are, and it's finding the way to keep the message, which is the kind of message I've been talking about, the empathy, the engagement of the head and the heart, the clear ability to show that you care. How, you know, it's the way teachers have found to make that happen online that's been so special. And I mean, you can get technical. We're using the platform we're using for this streaming is called Jitsi. So whether it's Jitsi or Zoom or Microsoft or Google or whatever it is, how can you use these tools to make these things happen? And my firm belief is that the technology is the least interesting part of that. It's just, okay, this is, you know, I don't give a damn what platform people use, or what amazing apps they use, or what shiny, buzzy, whizzy things they use. Because the issue, you come down to the same issue always. How can you somehow provoke and engage your students in content and activities which will be good for their soul and their English at the same time? So you know, we can talk about breakout rooms in Zoom, of screen sharing, of how you use the chat room to allow students to have their say and say what they want to say. We can talk of the importance, especially with younger students, of reaching out to their parents so that their parents are on board. We can talk about amazing things that have been done in some places where kids don't have decent access to Wi-Fi and broadband, of how in some communities teachers have publicized locations like farmacias and supermercados to leave material for them to pick up, free material to take home and work with. We can talk about all those beautiful things that teachers do, because they care enough to want to keep education going, even in this difficult situation. But the issue has to be, this is the reality we now have. Let's forget the technology for a minute. What do I want to do? Well, I want this to happen. I want that to happen. Okay, this is the platform I'm allowed to use, or I can use. What can I use? How much of that can I do? And the most important thing, the most important thing that lockdown has taught me, by the way, in my life and everything, is that reaching out really matters. Reaching out, making contact, getting as close to people as you can. Even though, for example, you and I are having a fine time, but actually you're just on a big screen at the moment. and you're so many thousands of miles away, this should be impossible. But on the contrary, it is possible to build up a relationship and a contact and a walk.
This would be a great moment to share the song with you, but there's a little thing I would like to discuss briefly before we go. A problem we had in the past, and it's a problem, a worse problem now, that is testing, assessment. Oh, no, we skip it. Let's not talk about it.
Well, no. I would much rather not talk about it because it makes me unhappy or happy. Do you remember? It's this and it's that.
I know.
But I don't know. I don't really know what to say about it. I think I'm like every other teacher. So let's be quite clear. Testing. There are all sorts of good reasons for testing. It's motivating. It provides students with benchmarks. It provides teachers with benchmarks. It allows an education system to look at the whole system and say how things are going. It's a way of being able to say something about how good your English is, and so on and so forth. And it shouldn't matter, because you should just be able to say, I am who I am, and whatever my level is what matters. But it does matter. Exams should be a cause for celebration and joy, so that preparing for them should be really good fun. But they are frequently something else entirely. They're an opportunity to kind of to become slave drivers, to treat the students like cattle fodder. There are many situations in which test results are used to evaluate teachers, and I find that really, really difficult as a concept. We could argue, in my lifetime, many tests have become better and better. They do, the better tests make some significant attempt to have tasks in them that are not just mechanical and fill-ins and multiple choice and things like that. But that's not the same for all tests. I think for us as teachers, and it's so awful because we're responsible for everything, and sometimes the weight is just too much on your shoulders, But the task of teachers is to somehow make preparing for exams an enjoyable, exciting, ridiculous task. So that, bring students in on the secret of the test. What are they looking for? Why don't we design our own test? Let's see if we can write better tests than the tests. Now let's make the test into a game. Sort of and we don't have enough time, but there are all sorts of things you can do to make the test fun. Test preparation is not just a question of, just whacking students over the head with yet another fill-in, yet another something. There have to be ways of bringing them into the process, because I repeat and I repeat, we always repeat again and again, it's what's happening in the student's brain that matters, not what we do with them.
And there's something interesting that I would like to ask you. What do you think are the main challenges that beginner teachers face, or student teachers, during practice periods? Some of the people in the chat with us are students training to be teachers, and I don't know, is planning the challenge? Is goals the challenge? Course books?
Well, if you are watching this and you're training to be a teacher, or you're just starting as a teacher, there's so many things I want to say to you. And the first is, I just want to say good luck. I'm serious. Have the most wonderful time. The teaching English, teaching English. It can be the most rewarding and incredible experience in the world. I am profoundly grateful that that's, rather by accident, what I was led into. It's been a constant joy my whole life. It's also been a complete pain as well, because teaching is not easy. Teaching is relentless. Teaching is, there ain't any shortcuts to teaching. I could give you examples of great successes where your heart just wants to break open with joy, and I can give you examples of days when you just think you'd rather do anything else. That's what teaching feels like. But it's also, but at its best, it's the knowledge of what you're trying to do that makes it such a beautiful thing to do. It's about helping people. It's about making people. It's about giving people the ability or the encouragement to be better at whatever it is you happen to do. What a joyous thing to do for a life. It's not about manufacturing arms or killing people or making heaps of money. By the way, you will never make heaps of money. It's not about that. It's about making the world a better place, and that's not such a bad thing to devote your life to. Right. What's it like at the beginning? Well, at the beginning it's tough. It's exciting. It's exhilarating. It's just, you know, your nerves, they're all a quiver, and you freak out and stuff, but it's also exhilarating. It's so fantastic, you know, and you get through that 45 minutes, that 60 minutes, and it hasn't gone too badly, and you go, wow, you know. Best piece of advice, find a buddy. I don't mean a buddy. That's sounds totally kind of American buddy kind of thing. But find someone or a group, a little group, not a big group, but find a person or a couple of people to talk to all the time, to share, to say, this happened, I don't understand. Anyone got any ideas? And I tried to do this. Oh, I did this. Tell someone you can talk to. You know, at the beginning, your family and your siblings or your mum and dad or something, they'll probably say, oh, that's really interesting, dear. Or how are you getting on? Things like that. But that doesn't go on for long. They just, you had a good day today? No, okay, what's for dinner? Find someone else who's doing this to be able to talk to, because we're always better when we talk to someone else. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, which is what I think about teachers becoming virtual teachers suddenly in lockdown. Don't try and do everything at once. You can't be an expert at everything immediately. If you suddenly become a virtual teacher because there's a global pandemic has suddenly hit your country or the world, well, global, the world, don't try and be a tech wizard immediately. Just do the things you can do and relax. Just relax. You know, just see. Just concentrate on the little things. And so when you start out as a teacher, you may be able to consider some of the things I've been talking about in this kind of rather luxurious kind of general way. That's fine, and I hope you do think and philosophize like that. But what really matters is the little things. And you do a class and it doesn't quite work, and then you think, what about that moment? So you focus on that moment. Oh, if I did that moment slightly differently, maybe this would happen. And it's things like that. Think small, but dream big. Think small. Find a buddy.
I love it. Okay. Thank you a lot, Jeremy. This has been so good. I still can't believe it. Sometimes I think maybe I'm having a lockdown dream or something. So thank you a lot. I would like you to share something you promised that you would probably share with us, and people can say goodbye and say thanks or whatever they want, whatever message they would like to share with you. I can read later on, but I know you have like a little surprise for us.
I hope you won't mind if I do this. But you said at the very beginning of this chat that this room is indeed full of musical instruments, and I'm getting swamped by musical instruments because that's half of my life is loving and making music. And on Wednesday, I was made aware of a song that I hadn't heard before, which is, to my mind, almost as perfect a song as it could be. It's a little song, and it describes an event in 2015 in the United States. Very quickly, why do I love this song? It's because it taps into what I've learned in lockdown, which is the power and the need for empathy. It is so clear that some of our world leaders have been able to convey empathy for the populations they are supposed to lead, and some world leaders clearly have not. And I hate them for that. I don't hate anybody, I find that so difficult, because one of the roles that you take on when you are a leader, or if you like, a teacher, is the ability to empathize with people. So this song was written in 2015, and it describes a moment when the then President of the United States, Barack Obama, went to a place called Charleston in South Carolina. And he was there because there was a memorial service for 9 people, 9 churchgoers, perfectly ordinary, as far as one can tell, usually, normally nice and half nice and ordinary people sitting in a church, and some stupid little git took a gun into the church and he shot 9 of them for no particular reason, except I think that they were black. And Obama went to this memorial service, and when it came to the time when he had to speak, he couldn't find any words. So he did something else, and that's what this song is about. So I'm going to sing a song. Is that all right?
Yes, of course, of course. Yeah, we finish officially the academic part, and now we go into the music part, because Derek is a musician.
This is my latest acquisition. Is this rather wonderful little instrument? This is a kind of Indian European version of a bandoneon, really. So this is a song called "The President Sang Amazing Grace." Wait a minute, I'll just move my screen, because otherwise I don't want to chop my head off. Okay, so here we go. A young man came to the church, to a house of prayer, and no one asked what brought him there. He was not friend, and he was not kin, but they opened the door and they let him in. And for an hour the stranger stayed, and he sat with them, and he seemed to pray. But then the young man drew a gun, and he shot 9 people, the old and the young. And in Charleston, in the month of June, the mourners gathered in the room, and the president came to say some words, and the cameras rolled and the nation heard. But no words could say what must be said about all the living and about the dead. And so on that day and in that place, the president sang Amazing Grace. The president sang Amazing Grace. And then we argued about who's to blame, one man's hate or a nation's shame, some sickness of the mind or soul, and how to heal the wounds and make them whole. But no words could say what must be said about all the living and about the dead. And so on that day and in that place, the president sang Amazing Grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a poor wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you. Wow. People are so happy. They say thank you. Perfect way of finishing. Perfect human combination, teacher and artist. Thank you, Jeremy. I didn't know he was a musician. I told you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your empathy and sensitivity. Thanks for all of. Oh, wow. A lot of messages.
And to you, Carolina, a massive thank you for inviting me into your world. And to sort of having met your teachers. I wish I could see you. I wish I could talk to you. Wish we could, I don't know, have a little coffee or something, or maybe I don't know, or it's, you know, but that's just the way we are. But I've been honored and humbled to be part of this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you a lot. I'll stop streaming. Thank you guys for being there.